Well, CODESRIA is a Pan-African Social Science Research Council, and we are working on almost all the issues that most who is also interested in, looking at social transformation in its complexity, trying to understand the main drivers of social transformation, the forms that transformation is taking place, looking at not only the need for structural transformation of economies, but also the way societies are evolving. I think there are transformations that are already unfolding as a result of a number of factors: demographic changes, climate change, global processes impacting on our societies in so many different ways, and people reacting and responding to those changes, which is something obviously that is of great interest to social science. And we know that there are ways in which policymakers are trying to steer those changes or to make sure that they evolve in ways that make life easier for different people. It's all framed in terms of development and social change that is beneficial to the populations of Africa primarily. And it is taken up at so many different levels. The continent has adopted, with the African Union Commission taking the lead, an agenda for the next 50 years called Agenda 2063. And the agenda is the translation of a vision of an Africa of the future that would be a transformed Africa, where society would be democratic, the institutions of governance would be democratic, where the material conditions of the people will be much better, where the societies would be more inclusive. And I think these are the processes that most is also interested in. They are processes that are understood by different social groups in different ways. The young people of the continent are among the most dynamic today, and they are talking about the need for change. They are talking about the need for a new society, a new Africa, where they would have not only jobs but also a voice in the governance of these societies. The Senegalese youth movement came up with a slogan which is quite interesting and revealing. They're talking about a new type of Senegalese, a nouveau type Senegalais, which in a sense is a way of speaking to the importance of having societies that are based on principles and values, where all the problems that have been expressing themselves in different kinds of ways and impacting negatively on people's lives, whether we're talking about corruption or the fact that some people are holding on to power for too long, or the inequalities that have been discussed extensively in our societies, will be addressed. The interesting thing that's happening on the African continent today, although there's a lot of emphasis on the high growth rates driven by rising commodity prices and so on, Africa rising, it's a whole rhetoric narrative actually around that. There is also this other Africa which I think is emerging, and where we also have to have our hopes in a sense and accompany that process, and that is this Africa of young people wanting to have a greater say in what is happening, informed citizens taking a keen interest in what is happening to their countries and to their economies and to their societies, and connecting with other young people, not only within their countries, but also across the boundaries. In other words, some kind of new expression of Pan-Africanism. The movement that began in Senegal at the same time as the Arab Spring was beginning in North Africa. And you could see that their influences, they were sort of following very closely what was going on in North Africa, including in the way they were organized and mobilizing. They were emulating some of the things that the young people of North Africa were also doing. And they inspired the young people of Burkina Faso, who created a movement which called itself Ballet Citoyen. The Senegalese had just a simple expression, Yanamar. We've got enough of all the wrong things that are going on now, and we want a new Senegal, we want a new Africa. And they reached out to those elsewhere, and they inspired those of Burkina Faso, who said actually they were inspired by the Senegalese, and they formed their own movement called Ballet Citoyen. And together, we see young people in Congo and elsewhere also taking interest in what is happening. In other words, there is at the level of citizens, social movements, an interest in having a new Africa, which I think is an interest that is shared by people all over the world. It speaks to the same kind of issues as the Occupy movements in New York and elsewhere we're speaking to. And it sort of brings us back to a renewed interest, at least a need for us to become universal in the way that it is expressed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights a long time ago. And I think here one can see the role that most could play by being a global organization that can connect these different movements and get the conversations across the continents and across the cultures and languages to be connected. And I think it's where, at our own modest level as a Pan-African Social Science Council, we think we could also be part of that conversation, producing knowledge on those issues from where we are in Africa, bringing out our perspectives, and in connection with our colleagues in Latin America and Asia and in the Arab world, coming up with the articulation of voices, scholarly voices, which echo the voices of all these people who are active and seeking for a better world, fighting for a better world across the world on the global stage. And I think that's what would make both the knowledge more universal and the future we want, the world we want, which is the slogan of the Rio +20 movement, become a truly global and universal world.